My name is Sarah, and I'm from Occupational Therapy, and I will be teaching the exercise portion of the class. We're sorry that we can't do this in person, and we hope to return to that soon, but until then, here we go. I'll just be following along the handout, which is you probably have your binder at home, or wherever you're watching from. So if you want to just follow along, it is under the exercise tab in your binder. Okay, the first few pages are fluff. They tell you my name and other folks who may be teaching the class at some point, and what to expect, and we'll just kind of talk about that as we go. So we're going to skip ahead to page 3, where it says, have any of these things crossed your mind? Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is I promise I won't read to you. I don't like it when I'm in a class and people read slides, so I'm not going to be reading these slides, so don't worry about that. So I'm just going to kind of pick and choose things from each slide, and then if you do have questions, please do call the office and we'll get those questions answered for you. On this first slide though, where it says, have any of these things crossed your mind lately? Clearly that's why you're here. They have crossed your mind and you've thought of them, and that's why you're here. The one that we're going to talk about is in all caps and it says pain. When we talk about exercise, a lot of times people think about pain issues that they may be having that could come up. You know, exercise really should not cause pain. Sometimes people are fearful to exercise because of pain issues that they're having. We don't want you to be afraid to exercise. We don't want you to think that you can't exercise. There are many, many ways to modify exercises or activities that you even enjoy if you are struggling with pain. Exercise should not cause pain. If you are ever experiencing a sharp pain when you're doing exercise, you should stop what you're doing immediately. Now, that being said, if we're trying something new, some pain, and I'm talking about muscle pain, is to be expected, because of course your muscles might be fatigued or sore. If we're hydrated, that will help with that, and we'll talk about that as well. The next slide says, what are the 2 key components to living healthy? Now this slide, I did read that. This slide, I don't like this slide. Never have. And the reason I don't is because it has 2 bullet points: maintaining a healthy weight and staying physically active. In a slide, doesn't it look easy? In real life, we know it ain't that easy. But those are the 2 key components that we are going to talk about, and that is important to, of course, being healthy. Next thing we're going to talk about is motivation. Moving on to the next page. Now, this is a perfect time of year to be talking about this. I happen to be filming this on December 3rd. We're kind of rolling into the Christmas season where it's hard to resist certain cookies and things like that. And then we fall into New Year's. And what always comes with New Year's? New Year's resolutions. We've all made them. How many of us have been successful with them? I don't know. What are the top resolutions every year? Weight loss and smoking cessation. Let's talk about that. When we make goals, they have to be achievable. We can't make our goals so lofty that we just can't quite get there. Because if we can't quite get there, what happens to our motivation? It goes down. And then we're sort of stopping ourselves before we get started. And here's a good example of this. Before COVID days, before we were all worried about COVID and we had to do things like film this and not meet in person, and when we could go to the gym, on January 2nd, what does the gym look like? It's a packed house, right? It's full. You can't find a parking spot. If you are a normal gym goer, somebody's on your machine at your time and you're like, oh my gosh, it's a madhouse. But if you wait until mid-March, what does that gym look like? A lot less people. So formulating the goal is never the problem. I'm sorry, you're going to hear weird beeps. We're in a conference room in the hospital. So ignore that. If formulating the goal is never the problem, people know what they want. They just maybe aren't formulating the goal appropriately. Goals need to be planned and they need to be appropriate for you. You need to base them on what would be appropriate for you. You can't base it on somebody else. And my example for that is, if you've got like a Fitbit watch, an Apple Watch, any of those things, wonderful to have accountability partners, wonderful to be connected with your friends. But sometimes what we do is we start watching well, Joni did 6,000 steps already and it's 10 a.m. and I've only done 1,000 and this is bad. And then we start this negative self-talk to ourselves. So I don't want you comparing with other people. Your goal has to be based on you, and it has to be challenging but achievable. We want to challenge ourselves. That's the whole nature of a goal. It can't be too easy. But if it's too lofty, back to if we can't quite get there, it makes us feel bad. When we feel bad, our motivation is destroyed right away. So be cautious of that. Which brings me to the board here. Don't underestimate the power of your thoughts. Your thoughts are very, very important. This little equation goes with a theory called cognitive restructuring and is so important for so many things. But since we're talking about exercise, I'm going to relate it to how it might relate to exercise. It's really an acronym. A stands for some sort of action or activating event. B stands for your belief about that action or activating event. And C is the consequence of what you get when you add these two things together. What if A, and the action we're talking about is exercise, which of course is what this class is about. If my A is exercise, what are my beliefs about it? Think about that. What do you think about when you think about exercise? I'll share what happened to me this morning when my alarm went off at 5:23. My first thought about exercise wasn't positive. And so be aware of that. That's very normal. We're human. We're going to have negative thoughts. However, we need to be able to move past those negative thoughts, and we need to be able to kind of push past and work through and change those thoughts. Because if we can't change our beliefs or our thoughts, our consequence is bad. If I wake up morning after morning and I say to myself, ugh, I'm too tired, I don't want to, I don't like exercise, the only time I have to do it is the morning, but I hate getting up, I don't know how I'm going to fit it in. What is my consequence going to be over a long time? Exercise or no exercise? Likely no exercise, because I've sort of talked myself out of it before I've even gotten started. That is the hardest part of exercise. The physicality of actually doing exercise, while not always enjoyable, isn't the hardest part of exercise. The hardest part of exercise are your thoughts about it. What is your belief about it? Can you get past that? You're going to wake up and you're going to feel tired, and that's my example. I exercise in the morning, and so that's often where I find myself falling into this pitfall. But there's other times, maybe you exercise after work and you're had a long day and you're tired, and the last thing you want to do is drive to the gym. You want to go home. You want to put your sweatpants on. You want to sit on the couch and get your feet up and get yourself a break. So this is the hardest part. How can we challenge those thoughts to get to it so that our consequence is successful exercise and that we have made some sort of routine for ourselves? People who have a routine do far better than people who bebop around and don't make a plan. So we need to stick to routine and just think about that equation. That will help tremendously. Okay, moving off of motivation, let's talk about, I believe this is on page 5, what works. What works for one does not necessarily work for the other. You really need to think about your lifestyle and what works for you personally with your family, your work-life balance. So, what time of day works for you? If you miss your window, we all have sort of a circadian rhythm that we function under. If you miss your window, sometimes it's harder. I think I shared earlier, I'm a morning person. If I don't exercise in the morning, and I get till late afternoon, not only does it usually conflict with activities that we've got going on and I can't do it, but also even if it doesn't, a free day, kids aren't going anywhere like now, it's just not a time. I don't have the energy at that time, even if we're talking about 5 o'clock in the afternoon or evening. So think about that. What works for you as far as class versus individual exercise? Now, sometimes people tell me they are uncomfortable with group exercise, and I'd like to pose the question, normally I do in a group setting and a bunch of hands go up. Who has had a not so good experience in a group fitness activity, whether that be at a big box gym or, you know, the Y, any of these places. I mean, all of us, right? We've all had a not so great experience. What I don't want you to do is completely write off group activity or exercise as not for you because you've had one bad experience. That is pretty common for people. They go, they feel uncomfortable for whatever reason. Sometimes it's just that they're not gelling with the instructor. And let's face it, this is just being honest. Just like any other profession, there are some fitness instructors who are very, very gifted, know exactly what they're doing, you know, have really studied the body and how to modify exercises and things like that. And then there are group fitness instructors who are, you know, mediocre. That's like any other profession, right? So don't let the person who you don't gel with or who may be mediocre ruin your whole perspective on group fitness and have that be a missed opportunity for you, because a lot of people are more successful with it. If you go to a group fitness class, the instructor should be standing in front demonstrating several exercises for you, not just one. They might say, here's level 1 of an exercise, here's level 2 of an exercise, here's level 3 of an exercise. And then it's your job to modify that to what would be beneficial to you. For example, we all know, I'm assuming, what a traditional push-up looks like. If we were in a class setting, I would do it. I would show you, but let's just, I think everybody can probably think in their head what a traditional push-up looks like. Well, if we're just getting started with exercise, a lot of folks aren't going to be able to do a traditional push-up. That is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, that requires a lot of upper body and chest strength of our whole body weight. So modification number 1 is a push-up from your knees. That takes a lot of the body weight off as we're building strength and endurance in our chest and arms in order to do that. So you could start with that modification and then work towards a regular push-up. Modification number 3, I will show that. You can actually find yourself in a corner, put your hands on the wall, and we push up like this. Now, the farther away my feet are from that wall, the harder this push-up gets because I'm pushing more weight. The closer I am to the wall, the easier this push-up gets because I'm pushing less weight. So we can modify in that way too. Maybe we're modifying because we're building strength and endurance, or maybe we're modifying because we have an injury. If I am somebody that has a rotator cuff problem, is it necessary for me to do a traditional push-up? Probably not. Why would I want to push that injury or inflame it or whatnot? I might modify that particular exercise all of the time. Doesn't mean with other exercises I don't move up. So you can gauge there how you're going to do that. Now, group exercise, where can I find it? Of course, you can go to the big box gyms. That's a great opportunity for a lot of people. Sometimes when we were in class, a couple things that would come up is people would mention they're from a smaller community, maybe outside the metro, and so they don't have a big box gym. So that gets harder for group exercise classes. Another thing people would mention is the price. We all know, and not to pick on any one of them, but you know, a membership at a place like Lifetime is much more expensive than somewhere else. And so what I want everybody to know about is, and bear with me, you'll notice if you look closely, this is 2016. I sort of coveted this because they now put all of these online, but I only bring it to class as a visual. This is Des Moines Community Ed, and Des Moines Community Ed has wonderful classes for not only adults, but also children. They have everything from art classes to financial classes to exercise classes. And I have my paperclip here to show you that during this particular session, there's a whole fitness and exercise section, several classes to choose from and much more reasonable. For example, this one I circled here, which I thought would be a great starting point for somebody. It was called Chair Yoga. Great starting point. You know, maybe you don't want to go to the boot camp 801 or whatever it's called because you're thinking, I don't know if that's a good starting place for me. But maybe chair yoga, that's wonderful because it might also be something, if you do sit at a desk during the day, can you incorporate some of those moves into your workday as well? But even better than that, 6 weeks of chair yoga, 1 time a week, $30. So much more reasonable than joining a gym. And again, not that gyms are bad, they're wonderful for many people, but financially that can be taxing, as well as maybe you don't mind the fee involved, but you're just not sure if group exercise is for you. This is a great way to try it without being too committed. So I just like people to know about that. Okay, moving on. I think this is on page 6. It says, why should I increase my physical activity? A couple of reasons. Obviously, surgery provides an advantage. It is just a tool. The main reason is, and I am going to read this part, caloric reduction and aging both slow metabolism. Really think about that and digest that for a second, because what is going to happen directly after surgery to your calorie intake? It's going to plummet right away. I think, I won't get out of my lane here, but I think dietary in their thing says that first week it might be 100 calories. And so clearly our calories are plummeting. Also, I don't know about you, but I don't seem to be able to figure out how to get any younger. And so I don't think any of us are. So as we get older, our metabolism slows. These things, of course, are working against us. The only way possible to increase your metabolism is to move. That's it. Period. End of story. So exercise and movement are very, very important for burning calories and keeping active. And we're going to kind of revisit that in just a minute. So remember this calorie reduction thing, and we'll come back to it. Then the handout goes into the 7 general benefits to exercise. Now, some of these are, I'm not telling you anything new with some of these. Number 1, it helps to control weight. Obviously, the more that we are moving, the more calories we are going to burn. So I want you to think about your day. A lot of us, as evidenced by me sitting here, I am sitting in a chair. I flail my arms a lot when I'm talking, but I'm not moving. A lot of us with desk jobs that are sitting at a desk during the day, it's difficult to fit that in. So you need to get creative with how can you do that. Can you park farther out? Do you have the capability to park farther out wherever you work at and walk farther into your office? You can also practice that if you are at Walmart, Hy-Vee, Target, all of those places that you need to go to get your basic needs. Can you take the stairs? Normally I'm up on a 5th floor of a hospital building. I would not suggest that you go from doing, if you're a person who does not usually climb stairs, I would not suggest that you go from doing no stairs to doing 5 flights of stairs, because back to our goals need to be challenging but achievable. That's not achievable. That's too much too soon. But can you climb 1 flight? Can you climb 1 flight of stairs and then hop the elevator from there to wherever your destination may be? And you're going to do that for a week or 2 as you build that endurance, and then maybe you add the 2nd flight. Other things, if your laundry is in the basement, we all tend to heap up the basket, so we only have to carry it down once. Maybe you take a couple things down and you walk back up, and you take a couple more things down and you walk back up. You can split it up, do a little pile in the morning and a pile in the afternoon, but can you get some more steps in that way? So just being creative. When you go to get groceries, I tend to do this anyway because I'm never organized with my grocery list, but when you are in aisle 1, and don't get everything you need in aisle 1. Get your, I always start in produce for some reason. So when I walk into Hy-Vee, I tend to walk in the produce side. Maybe I go get my apples, and then maybe I go clear across to dairy, which is in the far back left corner, and I get my milk. And then maybe I go back clear across and I go to the meat counter to get what I need. And so things like that. So working on how can you, simple ways to increase movement. Exercise number 2. We know that exercise helps to combat health conditions and disease. It is very well researched that people that exercise have better circulation. Blood clots are what cause heart attack and stroke. And so it doesn't mean it's the end all be all, of course not, but it certainly can help with reducing those risks for those things. We've had great success with people getting off things like type 2 diabetes medications. And I used to work in mental health and could get up on a soapbox. I promise I won't, but it does wonderful things for your mental health. Which brings me to number 3, exercise is a natural mood booster. It really helps to increase positive endorphins in your brain, makes you feel more energized, just changes your whole brain chemistry. So it's really important to do for that reason. I also kind of led me into number 4, it boosts your energy. People that exercise have more energy than people that do not exercise, which doesn't that seem odd? Because with anything else that we do, it seems like if I spend more money, I have less money, right? And so this is weird, right? If I exercise more, how is it that I'm gonna have, it seems like I'm expending more energy, so I should have less. But that's not how it works when we're talking about our body and the mechanics of how that all works. When we exercise, we actually produce more energy. There's actually research studies out there, I encourage you to look them up if you question it, about people who sit in like a cubicle setting, and people that exercise are able to stay focused for longer periods of time and usually have more output as far as their work is concerned. So check that out, it's pretty interesting. Number 5, exercise promotes better sleep. We all know what it feels like to be totally exhausted. That's not new. We've all had that day at work, you know, stressors with kiddos, what have you, and we get home and we're like, okay, oh my God, I can't do one more thing. I'm just gonna veg out. Can't do one more thing. But what I want you to think about is that emotional fatigue or physical fatigue? Because usually when we're really fatigued, it's emotional fatigue. It's stressors that we're having through the day. Again, back to my person who sits at a desk during the day. That's the nature of their job. They can't help that. But are they physically tired? Probably not. Emotionally tired? Sure. But if your body is also tired, you sleep better. So if we can sort of tax that body, we're going to sleep better. 6, ready? I'm going to get red in the face. It can spark your sex life, sort of for all of the reasons I just mentioned. And then 7, it's fun. Now I hate how 7 is typed. Whoever typed this, and it may have been one of us, I'm not really sure, but I always think it's funny how we typed, it's fun, exclamation point. Because as we talked about earlier, when I was pointing out A plus B equals C, it's not always fun. Nobody's gonna try to tell you it's fun. Sometimes it's fun, it should sometimes be enjoyable, but it's not always. And that's why it's really important to really think about, are you doing an activity that you enjoy? Now, does that mean you're going to enjoy it every time? No. But for me, the example is a treadmill. I hate them. You will not catch me on one. Years ago, that's what I would do. I was a gym member and I thought I'm going to walk and or jog on the treadmill. I don't know about you, but when I am on a treadmill, and let me say that they work for lots of people. So back to what works for people, what works for me may not work for you and vice versa. So if a treadmill is working for you, I would never tell you to stop doing it. Do it if it works for you. But for me, I am the person who I can cover the council. I'll get my little magazine and I'll put it up there and I'll start to going. And I got my headphones on and I'm cranking my music and I start to going. And then my mind starts to wander. And I start to think about all the other things that I need to do. What are we gonna have for dinner tonight? And I should start prepping that. And oh my gosh, I think I left the chicken in the freezer. And I'm not gonna have time to thaw that before I have to make it, before I have to get my kid to their activity. Oh my gosh, I don't know. And I have all this laundry. And then you start guilting yourself as in you don't have time to be on this treadmill because you've got all these other things to do. And then I'll look because surely it's been 20 minutes, surely. And I turn my magazine down and it's been 2. It's been 2 minutes. That, folks, is called torture. And that is why you will no longer find me on a treadmill. They don't work for me. It's just I can't get out of my own head to continue on, and it ruins my motivation. Now, if I'm walking outside, I don't find that as an issue for me. So I don't know what the difference is there, but I'm not a machine person, and that's why. So really think about what works for you. And if you're finding, and it took me a long time to figure that out, I tried the treadmill for a couple years. So if you're just finding that every time you're doing something, you are hating it every time, perhaps that exercise that you're doing is not for you, and you need to be a little bit more creative with figuring out what is it going to be for you, or changing it up. Okay, moving on to exercise frequency. Now, usually when I was doing classes, people would share what they were doing for exercise. Here, of course, I can't do that. Sometimes when people were coming into class, they were already pretty actively exercising. Sometimes people were just getting started. No matter where you're at, it's okay. It says 60 to 90 minutes to promote weight loss in this handout. That is a starting point. So if you are already doing that, fantastic, keep it up. Can you continue to up that as appropriate for you? If you're not there, then I want you to start with that. Something is better than nothing. Back to our goals need to be challenging but achievable. If you think, boy, I don't know how I'm gonna get 60 minutes in, sometimes we need to break that up. I don't care how you do it. I don't expect anybody to work out or exercise for 60 minutes in one setting if they're not used to that. And again, that wouldn't be planned or appropriate. So can you do 20 minutes Monday, 20 minutes Wednesday, and 20 minutes on Friday? Or however you want to break that up. Maybe within the 20 minutes, you do 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon. It does not have to be lumped all together. I just want you to make the number. And then as you gain strength and endurance, we'll start lumping it together a little bit more. It says to progress in about 5-minute increments. I'm going to say that's based on age. I'm going to say that's based on endurance and strength that you may already have. Some of us, if we've got somebody who's 20 years old, great, do a 5-minute increment. If you were doing 20 minutes and you've done that for a while, now do 25. If we're 75, maybe you do a 3-minute increment. Do what's right for you. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you what it needs to do. The handout then kind of goes into accountability. We've talked about that a little bit through exercise classes. They can certainly help you keep accountable. If somebody expects you to be there, if you've said you're going to meet a friend and you don't show, these are things that can help keep us accountable. Fitbit. Myself, this is going to date me, but I don't use my phone calendar. I find that challenging. I'm not really sure why. So I still have the big calendar with boxes. If I plan to exercise for the day, I write it down because there's something about me that likes to check off a list. My husband hates that about me, but it works for me. He only hates it when I'm making him a list. But if I can't check it at the end of the day, it bothers me. So if I have written it down and I have to look at it, makes me way more accountable. So find out what works for you there and use it to your advantage. Then it goes into other recommendations. We already talked about setting a regular time and routine. That's very important. Shoes, obviously, it says wear a comfortable shoe, clearly. Now I'm going to tell you that we all know shoes can be rather expensive. But, depending on what you're going to do, try to match your shoe to the activity that you're doing. For example, a couple years ago, my husband got back into playing racquetball because he likes sports and he's a little bit competitive. And so he kind of could forget that he was exercising. And of course, it's a lot of exercise. But he wore, I'm going to say, an old running shoe to racquetball. And racquetball's a lot of side-to-side motion, of course. And he blew a hole right out the side of his running shoe. Running shoes are made for a forward and backward motion. They are not made for side-to-side forceful motion. And so think about that when you're buying your shoe. What do I do mostly, and how can I match my shoe to the activity? Also, shoes are kind of like tires. They need to be rotated. We all have a gait pattern. We might walk more on the inside of our foot or the outside of our foot. If you are setting your shoes down on the ground and you can see that your shoe is turned in or turned out or worn on the bottom based on your gait pattern, those shoes are too old to be exercising and they're too worn. You don't want to see any wear on your shoe. So just think about that. Obviously, we talked about pain in the very beginning. Respect pain. It says here, sharp pain is very different than exercise pain, and knowing the difference between those two. And what I mean by exercise pain is, muscle soreness, muscle fatigue, a stretch, things like that, versus I've got sharp pain because I've got bone on bone knee issues. So knowing the difference between those two things. Water, again, I won't get out of my lane. I'm sure the dietitian is going to talk about this, but if you look this up, you're going to see that each of us should be drinking half of our body weight in ounces every day to get enough water that we need. Now, I'm a terrible example today because I don't have a water bottle even sitting in front of me, and I don't know how long I've been talking now, but long enough that I should have taken a sip of water. We recommend that everybody takes a sip of water. Try to do it at least every 5 minutes, because right now, before surgery, if you are 8 ounces, 8 ounces, of course, is a cup. Let's say you're 8 ounces short on your water goal. Right now, you could go, okay, no problem. I'm just going to down this. I'm going to do a couple gulps and I'm going to down this 8 ounces. After surgery, of course, that doesn't happen. We don't have the room for that anymore. And of course, we don't want people uncomfortable. So trying to get your water in earlier in the day and not waiting till the end of the day, but also little sips here and there so that we're keeping hydrated and getting in what we need. We recommend at least 64 ounces for your day. And then that last bullet point is true but misleading, where it says most weight loss occurs in a cardiovascular mode. All that means is that our heart rate is increased. And yes, we burn more calories when our heart rate is increased. However, we cannot underestimate the importance of strengthening activities. And we're going to talk about that because strengthening activities build muscle and muscle burns fat. And that's what we're trying to do as far as our exercise is concerned. Okay. For whatever reason, the handout first goes into stretching. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on stretching because, we all know it's important to stretch. Shocker. That is probably, though, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people doing. For example, when I could go to a gym, again, before COVID times, and I was in a group setting, people would do the stretching or the warm-up before the actual class started, because usually that's built into and part of the class. But after class, what I would see people doing is they would do their cardio or whatever the class was up until the very last second that they have to grab their gym bag and then they run out the door. Please don't do that. I would venture to say that stretching after is just as important as stretching before, because especially, again, back to this time of year, if I leave a warm setting like a gym and I run out to my car and it's 25 degrees out and I'm sitting in my car, and then maybe I go shower and then I go to work and then I'm sitting at a desk, that is going to cause muscle shortening, of course, and it's better to stretch those muscles after they're warm. We get in a nice deep stretch and help to prevent injury. So the handout goes into some basic stretches to do. Now, this is certainly not the end all be all to stretches. There are far more, as I'm sure you're already aware. These are good stretches to do if you do sit at a desk during the day. You've probably noticed my posture already. We don't necessarily all have good posture all the time. And if we are sitting at a desk, we tend to kind of, hunch our shoulders if we're typing, or slouch over after a while. So making sure you've got good posture helps decrease tension in the neck and the shoulders. So the first one is a head tilt. And all you're doing is you're just tilting your head to the side, trying to sort of touch your ear to your shoulder without hiking your shoulder. And we hold that. I'm not going to hold them for 30 seconds, although that's what the handout says. And then you go back to neutral, and then you're tilting over to the other direction. And I can feel that nice stretch kind of relax in my shoulders as we speak. The next one is called a chest stretch, and it is the same thing that I showed you for the push-up modification, except instead of going back and forth like you would for a push-up, you're just leaning in. And when you lean in, you're getting a nice stretch through the chest and even into your shoulder area a little bit, and that feels pretty good just to open up the chest. Shoulder and arm, and you can do this sitting or standing. You are just reaching across and applying a little light pressure to right above that elbow and trying to hug it towards your body, and that stretches the deltoid area. And of course, we'll switch sides. Calf stretch. You can do that standing and again pushing on a wall, and we're just trying to stretch that calf. Now, one thing I don't want you to do, regardless of what stretch you're doing, I don't ever want you to bounce. Bouncing isn't good. So just holding it and then switching and holding it. And then that last one, low trunk rotation. It shows that somebody is basically, they're laying on the ground on their back and they have their knees bent to about 90 degrees. And then they're just lobbing their knees over to one side, keeping their torso towards the ceiling and holding that and going back to neutral and then putting their knees over on the other side. Now, if I'm in a chair, what I can do is face forward like I am here, keeping my knees and toes forward, but I'm twisting my torso instead. Very similar stretch, and then you can switch sides there. Okay, moving on. This is probably the most important part of the whole conversation right here. Page 16 and 17, I believe it's on. And we're gonna talk about target heart rate and why it's so important. Do you remember when we were talking in the beginning of the class and I said, remember this, we're gonna come back to that. And we said that caloric reduction in age slows metabolism. And the only thing to do to increase that metabolism is to move. What we need to define is the difference between movement and exercise. And the biggest mistake people make with exercise is often they kind of make those two things the same thing. And what I want you to know is movement and exercise are two completely different things. So when we are exercising, we're going to consider exercise when we are in what's called our target heart rate. So if you look at the chart, there's a graph in your binder there. Target heart rate is based on age. The younger we are, the higher we need to get our heart pumping to be considered target heart rate. As we age, that lowers a little bit. Target heart rate is 60 to 80% of your max heart rate. Now, if you're new to cardio exercise, don't be alarmed. You will likely hit max heart rate and you will likely hit it quicker if you're new to it, because the more you increase your endurance, the less time you're going to spend in max heart rate, and you are going to start sliding back into that target heart rate. And the reason I'm mentioning that is sometimes when people start, if they've got they're monitoring their heart rate through maybe their Fitbit or their Apple Watch, something like that, and they start with their resting heart rate, and then they start to amp up a little bit and they're exercising, and then they might jump right over target heart rate and plop into max heart rate, and they're like, no, I don't want to be in max heart rate, I want to be in target heart rate. Why is that happening? The answer is stick with it. Stick with it, because the more endurance that you build, the less time you're going to spend in max heart rate and the more time you're going to spend in target heart rate. Why we're mentioning target heart rate and why it's so important is it's our caloric burn sweet spot. It is where we get the most bang for our buck. That is where we burn the most calories. So what is exactly the difference between exercise and movement? Let's say I leave work and I have to run an errand. So I'm gonna go to Walmart. And I've got about 10 things on my list. And I park far out from Target, or we all know Walmart, I said Target, Walmart parking lot, although both, wherever you're going, the parking lots are huge. Let's say I park far out and I walk in, and then I walk through the store, which is also big, and I get my 10 things. And of course, if you're anything like me, I think I shared this about the grocery store already, you know I've gotten everything I need over here, or I thought I have. I've walked clear to the other side of the store, and then whoops, I forgot the thing over here. So I've probably done the length of the store a couple of times, and then I check out, and then I walk clear back to my car. We're talking about me in this example, and it depends on our age and all those things, but the question is, did I exercise? And the answer is no, I did not, because I am young enough that nowhere in that equation did I fall into my target heart rate. Now, it's certainly movement. It certainly counts on my steps. If I'm wearing my Fitbit step counter or my Apple Watch or whatever it is, I may have taken 3,000 steps in all of that, which is fantastic. But did I actually exercise? And the answer is no. So we want to be gaining in our lives, and again, we're all a little bit different, but we all want to be doing increased movement and increased exercise. And in order for you to count it as exercise, we need that heart rate to increase because it's our caloric burn sweet spot. So both are good. We just need to make sure we're getting both in. Okay, moving on to strengthening. I touched on this earlier and I said cardio is certainly important, but it's not the end all be all. And the reason for that is because, strengthening is so good for our bones, but also when we build muscle, muscle helps to burn fat. And so strengthening, we want you to strengthen at least 3 times a week. Now, I will tell you that there are plans out there, and you've probably seen them, that are confusing. I think they're confusing. It'll say, you need an ab day, a leg day, an arm day, a this day, a strength day, a cardio. I don't have time to think that through. And probably you don't either. So just make sure you're getting strengthening in 3 times a week. It does not have to be separate from cardio. So back to if you are participating in a group exercise class, a lot of times some of it's cardio and some of it is strengthening. They don't have to be on separate days as long as you're getting the strengthening in 3 times a week. I also don't want you to feel like you have to go to the gym and be the Incredible Hulk. Sometimes people are uncomfortable with lifting weights, or maybe they've not done that before and they're not really sure body mechanics wise how to do it well. That's okay. There's room for error and there's room to learn that. However, you don't have to lift weights if you're uncomfortable with that. Often our body weight is enough. So for example, if I'm sitting in this chair, and this chair has wheels, so bear with me, but I am doing this activity and I'm standing and I'm sitting and I'm standing and I'm sitting. What is this called in exercise world? It's called a squat. This is a body weight and or strengthening exercise. I haven't added weight. I'm just using my own body weight, but it's still a strengthening exercise. Now, if I also want to hold a 5-pound kettlebell while I do it, I can do that too, but I don't have to. And of course, you'll gauge that on, what life is like for you. Okay, strengthening wise, what we like to talk about is these bands. These are a wonderful alternative to weights. Maybe you're exercising at home and you don't have a lot of free weights. Maybe you're uncomfortable with free weights. Band's a great opportunity to add some resistance. Also, sometimes easier on people's joints. If people are real arthritic or have problems in their hands, sometimes weights are hard to hold. This makes things a little easier too. You probably were issued those when we gave you your binder, I'm assuming. There's 3 of them. I do think they've changed the color. My light one is orange. I think your light one might be red. And then the medium is green. And the heavy band is blue. And you'll be able to tell which is which just by pulling on them. So when you are doing strengthening, the first exercise is called a chest press. You can do any of these standing or sitting. What you're gonna do is you're gonna grab onto that band and you're gonna put your arms, I'm jumping ahead. You're gonna put this behind your back like this. So it's on your shoulder blades, and I'm going to do it sitting, but you can do it standing if you want to. And you are just pushing out and bringing it back in. And you're pushing out and you're bringing it back in. I want you to picture somebody on a bench press, laying down on that flat board, and they're pushing the big barbell over them. This is the exact same exercise. We're just doing it a little bit differently. Now, if you say, you know what, Sarah, the red one or orange, whichever color yours is, it's too easy. But I tried the green and the green was too hard and there's nothing between light and medium. What do? My answer is, if you're putting this behind your back and you need more, stretch it out and choke up. These stretch quite a ways, and I can make an exercise harder by putting more resistance on it, or easier by putting less resistance on it. So again, modifying what is appropriate for you and working up from there. Next exercise is a seated row. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this. If you have a really heavy piece of furniture, and it would have to be heavy because we're using our lats when we're rowing, and you know, we're all capable of pulling things over. So be careful with that. I'm gonna demonstrate on this chair, which of course would not be heavy enough to do. But let's say I've got a heavy oak table that's not gonna move. I'm gonna row like this. I'm gonna hold it with my foot, but this is a row. Now, if I wasn't holding it with my foot, obviously I'd be pulling the chair. So you don't want that. If you don't have something heavy to loop it around, what you could do is sit kind of farther out in your chair, and you could put it around your feet. And once it's around your feet, you can row like this. What else is so great about these bands is that they fit in your purse. And maybe you want to exercise or do some strengthening on your lunch hour so you don't have to do it later when you got to worry about kids' activities and whatnot. Can you bring them to the office? Can you do them in the office, or if you're in a cubicle setting, things like that? They travel well. I don't know that any of us are traveling right now, but when we return to traveling, hopefully sometime, these are easy to go with. The next one's a bicep curl. Again, you can do it seated or standing. I'm going to stand for this one. I think this one's easier to stand with. You're just going to step on the other side, and you are going to bicep curl up like this. We're going to isolate that bicep and curl up. Now, something to be cautious of. If you use a free weight, which is also okay, if you choose to use a free weight. I'm going to use this water bottle as an example as my free weight. A pet peeve or a mistake I've seen people make in the gym is don't grab a weight that's too heavy for you. You're doing far better off to grab a 3-pound weight if that's what you need, as opposed to a 10-pound weight and do it not correctly. So for example, sometimes I've seen, I'm going to pick on men because men like to lift these big heavy weights, but I've seen people before grab these big giant weights and they're doing this. Is this a bicep curl? No. This is bad for a lot of reasons. First of all, bicep curl, we're really just isolating the bicep and just trying to move the bicep. I shouldn't be bending my knees. I shouldn't be swinging my arm back. I shouldn't be using momentum. And if this is a heavy weight and I'm doing that, what is that going to do to my back? That's a good recipe for injury. So go down in weight and do it properly, and then you'll be able to add weight sooner that way. Shoulder flexion. I like to do this one seated. I think this one's easier seated. You are just going to grab on straight out in front, and you're going to tilt that band, and you're going to put one fist sort of on your knee, and the other one, your thumbs will be facing each other, and you're just going to pull kind of diagonally back, and then to switch sides, you're just going to tilt to the other side, and you're going to pull this way. And then shoulder abduction, again, seated or standing, you're doing straight out in front, and you're pulling it out, bringing it back, pulling it out, bringing it back. So this is what you're going to choose to do for your strengthening, which of course is 3 times a week. I want you to try to do 10 reps. Start with 10 reps and then add to that. Now, I will tell you that this is not an easy thing to do. You can stay on the light for quite a while before you need to move up to medium. Some of our men know, of course, men are stronger than women. Their starting point might be blue. Because, you know, I can barely pull this one, but some men might be able to. If you've maxed out on blue, then you're either going to have to go to a free weight, or you can double these bands up. So you can double them up for more resistance. But start with 10 reps, and then maybe you do 15 and you move up from there. Okay, that's pretty much it. It does show a couple of other seated knee raise. That's really a march. This is a good thing to do if, you know, we talked about squats, we talked about climbing, but let's talk about somebody who might need a knee replacement and who maybe is bone on bone with their knee. Well, then I'm certainly not going to suggest that they go climb stairs, because that's going to, of course, aggravate that knee. They also probably shouldn't be doing squats. So what can we do to get that cardio in? This is a nice thing you can do. We can march in a chair. How can I make this more challenging? I can speed it up. I can start adding my arms. If I want to get into my target heart rate, but I'm not quite there when I'm doing this type of a thing, what do I need to do? Put your arms over your head. If your arms are over your head, likely you're going to increase your heart rate and get into that target heart rate when you're doing this, because it is harder for my heart to pump blood against gravity up my arm and to come back down So raising your arms above your head naturally increases your heart rate. Okay, I hope to see everybody in class soon. Of course, we're limited by COVID. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you have questions, please let us know.